In this video, we'll be talking about the monopolist, or the firm that is the only seller in the market. First things first, we set a few rules about this market, and the first rule we have is that the good that the monopolist is selling has no close substitutes. So the first assumption is that the good has no close substitutes. Good examples of these goods is electricity and water, or utility in general. The second assumption that we make is that the monopolist, the firm, is a profit maximizer. So the firm tries to maximize profit. This is maximizing. So the firm is a profit maximizing firm. The third assumption is that the firm would choose a quantity. The firm would choose a quantity that maximizes profit. So the firm chooses quantity, chooses Q, that maxes profit. The fourth assumption is that the market has barriers to entry. So there are barriers for firms to enter. And these barriers can be anything. Usually it's a law from the government that allows this firm to be the sole producer of this specific good. For example, in our case, Meralco is the only supplier of electricity in Metro Manila. The fifth assumption, and this is just like the definition of a monopolist. The fifth assumption is that the monopolist actually has the whole market demand. So every person that wants to buy this good actually goes to the monopolist to buy this product. So the whole market demand is the monopolist's demand. So number 5, market demand. Market D is the monopolist's demand. And number 6 requires a little bit of math. And I think to explain this, it's easier to do this graphically. So let's say that the firm actually faces the demand curve like this. So in the horizontal axis, we have Q, and on the vertical axis, we have P. So quantity and price, and this is our demand curve. So we assumed a while ago that the monopolist actually chooses the quantity it wants to produce. So when it chooses a quantity, and let's set this quantity right here, let's say it chooses to produce at Q sub 1. When the firm chooses to produce Q sub 1 units of output, it has to make sure that each and every one of these goods that it produces is sold. And the only way to do that, the only way that all of his produces or output is sold, is if the good is sold at a price of P1, and this is based on the demand curve. So as we see, the price that the monopolist sets is actually based on the quantity because of the demand curve here. And so we can say that P is actually a function of Q in the monopolist's eyes. And this is what we actually call P as a function of Q, is actually what we call the inverse demand function. The inverse demand. Why is it inverse? Because the direct demand function is in the eyes of the consumer, and Q is actually a function of P in the eyes of the consumer. Why? Because the consumer actually decides the quantity it wants to produce based on price. And so this is actually what we call our direct demand. Direct demand.